How did two people who once couldn't stop talking become two people who don't know what to say? How did two people who laughed for hours, shared dreams, even finished each other's sentences, and counted the minutes down until they could be together again end up lying 6 inches apart in bed, but feeling miles away? Maybe you've asked that question. Maybe you've sat beside someone you deeply love and quietly wondered, what happened to us? Not because there was another person, or not because you stopped caring, not even because hatred entered the room, but because somewhere along the way you stopped feeling known. And perhaps even more painful, you stopped feeling like you knew them. Welcome to Pause and Respond. I'm Josua Rine, licensed professional counselor. And over the next several episodes, we're going to explore a question that I believe millions of people are quietly asking, but very few know how to describe. How did two good people who picked each other, who built a life together, slowly become strangers? Not enemies, not opponents, strangers. Because one of the greatest tragedies in relationships isn't that people become enemies. It's that they slowly become unfamiliar. And maybe that's why this kind of pain is so difficult to explain. You still love them. They still love you. Neither of you is leaving. But something feels like it's missing. And perhaps what makes this grief so confusing is that you don't always know what you've lost. You just know you missed something. So imagine Mark and Sarah. 20 years ago, they couldn't wait to be together. They talked all night. They dreamed about the future. They cried until they laughed. They shared fears, hopes. They promised each other to always stay close. And they meant it. Nobody lied. Nobody stood at the altar secretly planning emotional distance. Nobody imagined loneliness or imagined silence. Yet 20 years later, they still sleep in the same bed. They still pay the mortgage. They still celebrate anniversaries. They still say, I love you. They sit beside each other at church. They still attend family gatherings and still show up. But something has changed. Sarah misses Mark, and Mark misses Sarah. And the strange thing is, they're both right there. Some nights, Mark scrolls on his phone while Sarah watches television. Neither is angry, neither is trying to avoid the other. They're simply tired. And perhaps that's what makes the distance so confusing, because nothing dramatic has happened. No affair, no explosion, no betrayal, no obvious villain in the room. Just years of work, raising children, years of responsibilities and stress trying to survive. And somewhere inside all of those ordinary years, something quietly slipped away. Nobody gets married hoping to become roommates. Nobody stands at the altar and thinks, I hope one day we stop knowing each other. Nobody dreams of emotional distance or loneliness. Nobody plans to become strangers, and yet it happens. Not just to unhealthy people, not just to selfish people, not just to people who stop trying. It happens to good people, hardworking, responsible, faithful people. People who love deeply, who carry burdens, who are doing the best they know how to do. And that's what creates so much confusion, because many couples can't point to a disaster. There wasn't one terrible day, no single conversation destroyed everything. No one intentionally drifted apart. Instead, life happened. Careers happened, children happened, bills, stress, exhaustion. But while they became experts at managing life, they slowly lost touch with each other. Maybe you felt that. You still talk, but mostly about schedules, groceries, appointments, who's picking up who, what needs to be fixed, and what's due next week. And somewhere in the middle of all those necessary conversations, the deeper conversations quietly disappear. Not because you stopped caring or loving, but because life became too loud. And eventually, one day, you wake up and realize, I know everything about our calendar, but I don't know what's happening inside your heart anymore. Maybe you sat in the driveway for 5 extra minutes before going inside. Not because you don't love your spouse or you're angry. You just don't know what feels missing. Maybe you've picked up the phone to send a text, something vulnerable, important, and then decided to delete it before you hit send. Maybe you've looked across the room and thought, I miss us. Not just them, but us. Maybe you found yourself missing conversations you can't even remember. Missing the laughter, the friendship, the ease that you both had. Maybe you've become excellent roommates and great parents and successful professionals, responsible adults, and yet terrible historians of each other's hearts. Maybe you've learned everything about each other's schedules and forgotten to ask, how are you really? Maybe you've become so efficient at managing life that you've slowly stopped sharing it. Perhaps the strangest part is this. You don't want another person. You want your person. You don't want another marriage. You want your marriage. You don't want a different life. You're simply missing something inside the life you've already built. And maybe that's why some of the loneliest people in the world aren't alone. Some of the loneliest people in the world are deeply loved. Because loneliness isn't always the absence of affection. Sometimes it's the absence of access. And perhaps that's where our story really begins. Not with blame, anger, villains, but with a mystery. How did two people who once knew each other so well slowly lose access to one another? And more importantly, can it be found again? By now, maybe you're asking the question that Mark and Sarah are asking. Okay, but what happened? How did two people who once knew each other so well become strangers? And perhaps that's the wrong question, because most people assume relationships struggle because love disappears. I don't buy it. I don't think it's true. I think something else disappears. Not love, but access. Love may still be there. Commitment can still be there. History is still there. The desire to make it work may still even be there. But access slowly fades. Access to each other's fears, disappointments, hopes, insecurities, grief, dreams. Access to the parts of ourselves that most desperately want to be known. Because love requires more than commitment. Love requires access. Without access, people can remain faithful while becoming lonely. They can remain committed while becoming unfamiliar. And eventually both people start asking, what happened to us? Mark still loves Sarah. Sarah still loves Mark. Neither of them even have a question about that. But somewhere over the years, they stop sharing certain things. Mark worries about money. But he tells himself, Sarah already has enough on her plate. Sarah feels overwhelmed, but she tells herself, Mark is stressed enough. I don't want to burden him. Mark misses their friendship, but he thinks, maybe this is just what marriage becomes. Sarah misses feeling pursued. but she thinks, maybe I'm expecting too much. Neither person is trying to hurt the other. Neither person is withdrawing in anger. They're trying to protect each other. And that's the strange thing, because sometimes distance isn't created by cruelty. Sometimes distance is created by love, or at least what we think love requires. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin disappearing from each other. I think fear has a branding problem, because fear rarely sounds afraid. Fear sounds responsible. Fear says, don't burden them, handle it yourself, stay strong, don't start a fight, keep the peace. They don't need one more thing. And because fear sounds mature, good people tend to listen to it. That's why emotional distance often grows inside healthy-looking relationships. Not because the people stopped caring, but because they stopped sharing. Not because they became selfish, but because they became protective. Not because they stopped loving, but because they became afraid. Afraid of sounding needy, starting conflict, or the feelings of making things worse. Feelings of being afraid that they may be misunderstood or being too much for the situation. Afraid of discovering that they're no longer wanted. And fear is persuasive, because fear often disguises itself as wisdom. Maybe you've had a difficult day and said nothing. Maybe you felt lonely and convinced yourself it wasn't worth bringing it up. Maybe you've been carrying stress for months and never said a word. Maybe you've laid awake because you love, thinking, I wish they knew, but never saying anything. Maybe you've convinced yourself that you'll deal with it, or do you want to make things worse, or you don't want to burden the other person. And perhaps you don't even realize it, but you're slowly begun editing yourself. And this looks like only sharing the safe things, the practical things, the things that seem manageable. Yet meanwhile, the parts of you that most need to be known remain hidden. And over time, this leads to beginning feeling like you're unseen. Not because nobody loves you, but because nobody can know what you no longer reveal. Many good people accidentally confuse protection with love. But protection and love are not always the same thing. Love says, let me carry this with you. Fear says, I'll carry this alone. Love reveals, fear edits. Love shares, fear protects. Love moves toward, while fear quietly withdraws. Because both can appear selfless, people spend years protecting the relationship while unintentionally starving that very relationship. Both Mark and Sarah think they're helping. Both are trying to make life easier for the other. But every unspoken fear, hidden disappointment, buried sadness, or private struggle becomes another brick in the wall between them. Not because they stopped loving, but because they stopped letting themselves be known. Maybe you've become excellent roommates, great parents, or professionals. Maybe you've learned everything about each other's schedules and forgotten how to ask, how are you really? Maybe you've become so efficient at managing life that you've stopped sharing it. Maybe you've become experts at responsibilities, while becoming strangers to each other's fears. And perhaps that's what happened to Mark and Sarah. Not a lack of love or commitment or even good intentions. Just two people trying to survive life while accidentally losing access to one another. And perhaps that's the great irony. The very things we hide to protect relationships often become the things that slowly weaken it. The fears we bury, the sadness we conceal, the disappointments we minimize, the needs we silence, the grief we carry alone. And perhaps that's the tragedy. Many relationships aren't destroyed by hatred. They're exhausted by protection. Because love was never meant to carry life alone. Love was meant to carry life together. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Mark and Sarah forgot. And maybe that's what you've forgotten too. Not how to love or how to care, but how to let yourself be known. Because people don't stop caring. They tend to stop sharing. Love doesn't always disappear. Access usually does. And that's where the strangers begin. Not when love dies, but when access quietly disappears. And that is where the healing begins too. I think one of the reasons emotional distance hurts so deeply is because it's difficult to explain. People are comfortable explaining anger or betrayal, even loss. But very few people know how to explain what it feels like to miss someone who is sitting right beside them. How do you explain that? How do you explain grieving someone who will still sleep beside you every night? How do you explain missing conversations you can't even remember? How do you explain missing laughter, friendship, closeness? How do you explain missing an us that technically still exists? And perhaps that's why so many people feel guilty for feeling lonely, because they tell themselves, I shouldn't feel this way. My spouse loves me. Nothing bad or terrible has happened. Other people have it so much worse. I should just be grateful. And so they minimize their loneliness. They dismiss it. They judge it. But the loneliness itself doesn't disappear simply because you feel guilty for having it. I think one of the greatest surprises in relationships is this. We don't always miss another person. Sometimes you miss who you were together. The friendship, the ease, the dreams, the feeling of being pushed in a positive way. Feeling interesting to one another, the long conversations. And perhaps what you're grieving isn't the loss of that person. Perhaps it's the loss of the access. And that's different, because if a person is gone, there's nothing to rebuild. But if access is gone, something can still be found. Sarah misses the man who used to ask questions. Not because Mark stopped loving her, but because life became busy. Mark misses the woman who used to laugh more easily. Not because she stopped caring, but because life became heavy. Sarah misses road trips. Mark, long conversations. Sarah feels missing feeling pursued, while Mark misses feeling needed. Both of them miss each other. Neither knows how to say it. Neither wants to admit how lonely they feel. And so they both grieve quietly. And perhaps the saddest part is each one secretly believes that they're grieving alone. Sarah wonders, maybe I'm the only one who feels this. While Mark wonders, am I expecting too much? Maybe you've sat together at dinner and spent more time looking at your phones than at each other. Maybe you've stopped asking questions because you're afraid of the answers. Maybe you've convinced yourself that this is just what happens after 20 years. This is adulthood. This is just marriage. Welcome to normal. Maybe you've quietly mourned something without even knowing how to name it. Maybe you sat in the driveway for 5 extra minutes before going inside. Maybe you've picked up your phone to send a text and then deleted it. Maybe you've laid beside someone you love and wondered, do you miss us too? Maybe you've wanted to say, I don't need you to fix anything. I just miss feeling close to you. But those words never come. Maybe you've looked through old pictures, vacations, and messages and thought, we used to laugh, dream, talk more than we do now. Now maybe that question scares you because you worry about the answer. Maybe love died. Maybe something is broken. Maybe there's no way back. I think beneath every human heart lives a question. Not will I succeed, not will I be admired, not even will I be loved, but something far more vulnerable. Will I still be loved if I am fully known? Because those are two very different things, being loved and being known. People can love your strengths, your reliability, what you provide. People can love what you do. But the deeper question is this: if you knew my fears, my insecurities, my disappointments, loneliness, sadness, would you still choose me? And perhaps that's why so many people perform. We become useful, strong, responsible, pleasant, helpful, not because we're fake, but because we're afraid. Afraid of being that burden or being unwanted. Afraid of discovering that we are loved, but not truly known. And maybe that's why some of the loneliest people in the world are deeply loved, because affection and access are not always the same thing. Commitment and closeness are not always the same thing. Sharing a home and sharing a heart are not always the same thing. And that's why people sometimes say, I feel alone, even though I'm surrounded by people who love me. This doesn't mean they're ungrateful or that they're selfish or broken. But they feel something. Because every human heart longs for something deeper than admiration. Every human heart longs to be known, to be seen, understood, and chosen. Not for what it can produce or provide or accomplish, but for who it truly is. And that's not weakness. It's part of what it means to be human. That night, Mark rolls over and stares at the ceiling. Sarah is 6 inches away. Neither is angry. Neither is leaving. Both are tired. Both are lonely. Both miss each other. And both are wondering the same thing. Do you miss us too? But neither asks, because both are afraid of the answer. And perhaps that fear, more than anger, more than conflict or resentment, is where strangers are truly born. Not when love disappears, but when two people miss each other. They become afraid to tell each other so. Sometimes you miss who you were together. And perhaps that's where Mark and Sarah miss most. Not another marriage or life or a person, just each other. And perhaps, just maybe, that's while there is still hope. The good news is this: strangers are rarely created overnight. Because they aren't created overnight, they rarely disappear overnight either. And that's important to remember. Because when people become lonely inside relationships, they often assume something catastrophic has happened. But what if nothing terrible has happened? What if nobody ruined anything? What if there isn't a villain? What if two good people simply became busy, tired, overwhelmed, or protective? What if they spent years trying to survive life and accidentally stopped sharing it? Because perhaps that's the great tragedy. Not that people stop loving, but that they stop letting themselves be known. And maybe that's why healing rarely begins with grand gestures. It begins with the smaller things, the much smaller things, an honest conversation, discussing a difficult truth or a vulnerable moment. Maybe it's asking a question that hasn't been brought up in years. Because access isn't usually rebuilt through perfection. It's rebuilt through courage. That night, Mark rolls over and stares at the ceiling. Sarah's beside him, while neither are angry. They both keep wondering, do you miss me too? Well, maybe the greatest surprise is this. Perhaps the person you miss misses you too. Perhaps the person you've quietly been grieving has been grieving you too. Maybe they're just as lonely, just as confused and as afraid. Maybe both of you have spent years believing I'm the only one who feels this way. And both of you have been wrong. Because neither of you stopped loving. Neither of you wanted distance. Maybe neither of you wanted to be strangers. Maybe that's why hope still exists. Because the love didn't disappear. It was simply just the access. And if that's lost, it can be rebuilt. Maybe your marriage isn't broken. Your friendship, your family. Maybe you both aren't broken. Maybe two good people simply stop letting themselves be known. And what is made can often be repaired. Conversation by conversation, truth by truth, choice by truth, choice by choice. Because healing usually happens quietly. Hope is quieter than we expected. It's not dramatic, it's not flashy, it's not even instant. It's just two people in this example slowly turning back to one another. And that's where restoration begins. Not with answers or blame or shame, but with one simple question. A question neither person has had the courage to ask. Do you miss me? Do you miss us too? Because perhaps the answer is yes. And the person you've been grieving has been grieving you too. Because nobody marries a stranger. Strangers are not always lost. Sometimes they're simply waiting to become known again. Now, if today's episode resonated with you and you'd like to go deeper into emotional control, communication, and healthy relationships, I'd love to invite you to visit pauseandrespond.com. There you'll find books, workbooks, articles, additional resources designed to help you better understand yourself, strengthen your relationship, and learn how to respond with greater clarity instead of reacting out of fear, frustration, or being overwhelmed. Everything we do is built around one simple idea, and that's less reaction equals more choice. So if you're ready to continue your journey, please visit pauseandrespond.com and explore the tools we've created to help you build stronger relationships and a healthy emotional life. And remember, nobody becomes a stranger overnight, and healing rarely happens overnight either. But two good people can turn back toward one another. Two good people can become known to each other again. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I'm Josua Rine, licensed professional counselor, and this is Pause and Respond. Less reaction, more choice.